an award-winning investigative journalist, the host of John Solomon Reports, and founder of Just the News, John Solomon. John, welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, Rebecca. Thanks for having me on today.
Through the release of some of the Twitter files, we now have concrete confirmation on something millions of Americans have suspected for years now, and that is that there is a coordinated effort to silence conservative voices. I was wondering if you could tell our listeners what the possible, and I say possible because we know how deep the corruption runs, but what are the possible ramifications of these discoveries, and can Americans finally see some accountability and justice served?
Boy, those are great questions. In fact, I've said in recent weeks that I think it may be one of the single most important questions we're going to address in the next couple of years, because freedom of speech was the first freedom granted to us in the Bill of Rights. And I think it was intentional that the First Amendment was to guarantee free speech, because in a country, if you couldn't exercise your thoughts, if you couldn't challenge your government, then you really didn't have the sort of constitutional republic that our founding fathers and founding mothers wanted. And so what we have learned through the Twitter files and through companion lawsuits that the attorneys general of Missouri and Louisiana have filed, which has now given them deposition authority, is that there was a massive censorship machinery in America that ramped to life in 2019 and has been living very well since then, all the way through the 2022 election. And at first, most of us who suspected the censorship was going on were saying, oh, it's the young people in big tech that have leftist backgrounds and they're doing it, and they definitely were part of it. But there were two more layers, more concerning layers to the censorship machine that's now been unmasked by these documents. The first is a nonprofit world. Universities, some of them state or federally funded, and liberal advocacy groups creating a web of people who are fact-checking or disinformation checking. In other words, identifying opinions that they don't agree with and trying to cancel them. That is concerning in of itself, because a lot of those groups receive federal money or state money, or are universities that are subsidized by the taxpayers. But we now have the first and most overt direct confirmation that multiple federal agencies made requests to social media companies to silence conservative opinion. The FBI had a full-time task force sitting out in San Francisco that was forwarding requests, according to the agent who ran it, Elvis Chan. This is a deposition that came out of the Louisiana-Missouri case. He literally would take requests coming from FBI headquarters and send it to big tech, said, censor these guys. And he said about half the time, they followed the FBI's advice and censored an American. We have the CDC, the NIH, the Department of Homeland Security, all forwarding, and we now see the communications, forwarding communications, demanding that certain storylines, certain players, people like Alex Berenson, the former New York Times reporter, a respected reporter that dared to challenge the science of vaccines, being censored. And this was a much larger machinery than any of us, I think, expected to find. The U.S. government had a system set up, weekly meetings, a special communication system that was kept from the public, where censorship requests were coming in on a daily and hourly basis, particularly during elections. And they censored certain storylines, election integrity storylines, vaccination safety question storylines, questions about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden being corrupt, all censored, often with, ironically, misinformation being offered by the U.S. government. I'll give you one example. We all know now that the United States government told Facebook and Twitter that the Hunter Biden laptop that I and Miranda Devine and others worked on in October of 2020 was Russian disinformation. There wasn't an iota of evidence when the government made that claim to support that. And today we now know the laptop is real. In fact, it is in the possession of the FBI in the focus of a criminal investigation. The fact that the government would call something disinformation that it itself knew wasn't actually undercuts the whole claim of what they were trying to do. They said they were trying to root out misinformation. In that case, and in some other cases we've documented, the government was the purveyor of misinformation. The outcome was Americans' free speech was censored, was violated, was infringed upon, despite the Constitution's guarantee that that wouldn't happen from our federal government.
As it relates to Congress and the committees there, how long do you think these investigations and procedures will take in order to bear some fruit?
Well, that's a great question. I've been asking that question of all the lawmakers who come on. And I had Congressman Jim Jordan, and I want to focus on two things about the interview. The first is between him and Congressman James Comer. Comer runs the Oversight Committee. Jim Jordan runs the Judiciary Committee, they have the primary responsibility over these censorship questions. Their investigations have been underway for 6 or 7 months, meaning they're not just ramping up now. They already have a good majority of the material they need to explain to the American people what happened, which means the investigation time has been collapsed and sped up. What's more exciting is that this isn't just an exercise in exposing what is wrong. What Congressman Jordan said to me last night is he already has a legislative solution he's prepared to unleash in the next few weeks. A legislation that would prohibit a federal agency, whether it be the FBI, the CDC, or the NIH, or whoever it's going to be in the future, Homeland Security, from asking a big tech company to censor or throttle or slow down the opinions of any American unless they can prove that the actual information was overtly criminal, meaning you were soliciting a crime on a social media platform. But if you're just expressing opinion, like most of the people we've now seen in the Twitter files we're being censored for, the government would no longer be able to even make that request. It would be unlawful to make that request to a big tech company. That is one of the few areas there's a current loophole in the law. Big tech companies' communications with federal government didn't have any censorship protections. The Republicans are moving quickly to get that in there. It's almost certainly going to get through the House. As you know, states like Florida and Texas have also created their own laws like this. But if it were to get through the Senate, we would see a much more friendly, less hostile environment on big tech towards free expression in America. And I think that would be welcomed by all Americans.
Yeah, we'll be tracking that closely. Now, I know, John, that we mentioned how quickly news changes, but certain stories also have a unique way of really lingering or dominating a news cycle for a period. During President Trump's term, they would really, stick on topics that would negatively impact him for longer, such as his first impeachment. Now, obviously, this is by design, and the media has its own agenda, but sometimes that agenda backfires, and the American people sort of get to see them squirm a little bit. This new media obsession with classified documents seems to be one of those examples. They were very quick to really slam Trump for his handling of documents, despite him having the power as president to declassify any documents that he chooses. The coverage has been predictably more forgiving of Biden, and even now, former VP Mike Pence was found to have classified documents at his home. Moving forward, John, however they handle Trump, it would be hard for them to not follow the same procedure with Biden, especially considering the VP does not have declassification authority. But equal treatment seems very unlikely given the obvious double standard. So how do you see this concluding after all of the attention it has received?
Well, it's a great question. No one knows really how history will unfold. Based on what I've heard from the FBI, the Justice Department, the defense lawyers that are engaging on these things, the simultaneous discoveries of Joe Biden's classified document tranches and now Mike Pence has created an obvious out for everybody who wants to get out from under this, which is the system was broken. Everybody was walking out the door with classified documents, and therefore nobody's going to get punished. And I think that was not going to be the case 3 months ago, 4 months ago. I think Democrats in the Justice Department were eager to find some criminal charge to hang on Donald Trump. I think it's unlikely from my interviews with people inside the Justice Department, the FBI, inside the intelligence community, and the defense lawyers having communications. The discovery of Joe Biden and Mike Pence having the exact same problem, and perhaps a worse problem, because President Trump has a legitimate claim that he did and had the power to declassify documents at will. The two vice presidents don't have that same power. I think the outcome will be the Justice Department to say, listen, we had a broken system. We're not going to fault anyone. We're going to try to fix the system. That might be a good thing because there's two trends that I think concern most of the experts I've talked to over the last 20 years. The first is that too much information in the government gets classified. Things that don't need to be classified, things that have nothing to do with national security, get classified. Things like menus for state dinners. Why is that a national secret? Someone can watch the television and see what food was served. So the ability to end overclassification so that only the true secrets that need to be guarded are classified could be a good thing for America. It means we'd have more transparency. And two, when somebody realizes that everything in their possession is almost classified now, they start to become careless because they realize, well, there's a lot of things in here that are not a problem. I don't know why they're classifying this. You really want the people who have classification to realize that what they have are the crown jewels of American security, and they should guard it with the utmost thing, not put it next to their Corvette in their insecure garage in Wilmington, Delaware, like President Joe Biden has now acknowledged he did. So So I think that there could be some reforms to the system. Right now, most of the people I'm talking are thinking that all three of these cases are going to end up without any prosecution and that there'll be a blame on the intelligence community and the system at large. Now, that said, Joe Biden takes us in a second direction with his documents, something that doesn't exist with President Trump or Vice President Mike Pence. There has always loomed over the Biden family the corruption question. We now know that these documents that landed at the University of Pennsylvania and landed in the Wilmington home landed at a time when Hunter Biden was frequenting the house where the documents were stored, that some of the topics in the documents are topics in countries where Hunter Biden had a ongoing financial interest, like Ukraine, and that Hunter Biden was deeply involved in soliciting and trying to arrange large payments to his family from China, a country that spends a lot of time in espionage. The Republicans in Congress have legitimate concerns that the Hunter Biden classified document, or the Biden classified document controversy is more than just mishandling classified, that these documents may have been taken and moved around the country to places where the family could access them because it would bring benefit to some of their foreign clients. And they want to investigate that. They want a damage assessment for that. Even people like Adam Schiff, a Democrat who's often been defending of President Biden and very critical of Donald Trump, says we probably need a national security damage assessment for what happened with Joe Biden. That part of that story will probably live on. James Comer is going to own that part of the investigation as the chairman of the House Oversight Committee. But the questions it will try to answer is who had access to the documents? Were those documents valuable to Hunter Biden's clients? And is there any evidence that some of the information that the president had in these personal locations got passed on to the foreign clients that Hunter Biden interacted with? Those are questions that may outlast the mishandling of documents question.
Interesting. Now, here is something that goes maybe even a layer deeper into this document topic that I'd love your take on. What's most interesting is this isn't a new House Republican investigation. No. Biden's own DOJ blew the whistle on this. He has been historically unpopular for obvious reasons. America truly has been in decline since he took office and has been under complete Democrat control for 2 years. These rumblings could potentially be their way, or could they, I guess is my question to you, of discarding Biden for a different set of contenders to emerge for 2024. And if that is the case, who do you think the left has their sights on to be their nominee?
It's a great question. Listen, there's some interesting polling that came out on Just the News on Friday. 65% of Americans do not believe Joe Biden should run for re-election. That is a number I've seldom seen in the history of our country. He's only 2 years into the presidency, and people already have decided they don't want him back on the ballot in 2024. That is a very powerful counterforce that Joe Biden would have to reckon with. He'd really have to roll that back to have any chance of winning the nomination or the election in 2024. Most Democrats have seen this for some time. They realize that whether it was Afghanistan, the economy and inflation, which they mishandled, and so many other things, even baby food formula turning into a national crisis, that he may have run his comfort and his era of goodwill with the American people. So a lot of people have theorized that this leak, which came out at a very unusual time, 6, 8, 9, 10 weeks after the Justice Department already knew about the problem, may have been timed to get Joe Biden out. And the further intrigue is that since the leak came out, there's been one person who's been much more overt in her public policy and public appearances. That is Kamala Harris, the vice president. She went out and gave the abortion speech instead of the president. She's been taking some of the calls with world leaders. So there's some speculation that maybe there's some Roman Senate scenario going on in the Democratic Party. No matter whether this leak was intentionally designed to get him out or just happened and now has created a political dilemma for them, Democrats are very seriously raising the question, do they have the right person to run in 2024? If Joe Biden is deemed to be unelectable or he decides to step down for the controversies he's already enduring, a lot of people say, well, the vice president's the natural. Vice president's very unpopular. She really has proven herself to have fumbled many of the instances she's been on the stage. Even this past week, she did an energy event, and she was telling people about how incredible it is that you can turn a light on. I think most people know they can turn a light on in their house or put leftovers in the refrigerator. It was a very awkward speech that most Americans like, what is she talking about? These are like things we've had for 70 years. So I think she has some real baggage. The two people that I hear Democrats most talk about as most viable, Gavin Newsom, of California, and Jared Polis in Colorado. Jared Polis is a libertarian Democrat, has some of that appeal that might appeal to some libertarians, even in the conservative side, though he's very left on social policy and fiscal policy. Gavin Newsom would give us California for America. That would be a very interesting race for Republicans to run against. But those are the two names I most regularly hear. About 6-8 months ago, you'd hear Pete Buttigieg a lot. But right now, his stewardship of the Department of Transportation through all the airline crises have really crashed his rising star. And so I think those are the two people most people are talking about.
Very interesting. And I hardly doubt that they would be looking at Eric Swalwell or Adam Schiff. John, take a listen to this clip. Take a listen to this clip from Speaker McCarthy.
What did Adam Schiff do as the chairman of the Intel Committee? What Adam Schiff did, use his power as a chairman and lie to the American public. Even the Inspector General said it. When Devin Nunes put out a memo, he said it was false. When we had a laptop, he used it before an election to be politics and say that it was false and said it was the Russians. When he knew different, when a whistleblower came forward, he said he did not know the individual, even though his staff had met with him and set it up. So no, he does not have a right to sit on that. He can serve on a committee, but he will not serve on Intel because it goes to the national security of America. And I will always put them first, all right? And if you want to talk about Swalwell, let's talk about Swalwell, because you have not had the briefing that I had. Eric Swalwell had a problem with a Chinese spy until he served on Intel. So it wasn't just us who were concerned about it. The FBI was concerned about putting a member of Congress on the Intel Committee that has the rights to see things that others don't because of his knowledge and relationship with a Chinese spy.
Pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah. So, John, after hearing those strong words, is there any possible way, in your view, that congressional Democrats can circumvent McCarthy and place Schiff and Swalwell on the Intel Committee?
I've talked up and down the Republican caucus. There are 222 votes that will absolutely stick by Kevin McCarthy on keeping these two off the committee. They're not going to get on the committee, and they're not going to get on for good reason. And I think the Democrats, while they made a meager effort at trying to do it through Hakeem Jeffries in the last 48 hours, know that this is a losing issue because all Kevin McCarthy has to do is ask the FBI to declassify some of the information. There is some stuff on Eric Swalwell that the Democrats will never want public, and I think it will do that. And I want to go back to what was said about Adam Schiff. I've had my own personal struggles with him. He released my phone records without even checking with me as a reporter and inferred what they might show without ever interviewing or even asking, doing due diligence. But over the course of 2017 to 2022, when I was a young student at Marquette, I did a paper on Joe McCarthy and what McCarthyism was and the tactics that made McCarthyism so powerful and also so heinous to so many Americans. Adam Schiff fits all of the tactics, and he's modernized all the tactics that were used in the Joe McCarthy era. He's the modern day Joe McCarthy. He would tell people, I've seen the evidence and there's collusion, and the FBI had no such evidence, and he couldn't have seen it. And then he would change his mind and say, well, if you're willing to see it, you can see it. Well, even if you were willing to see it, you couldn't see it. He has time and again given the public a false story and stuck to it and doubled down on it, tripled down on it, used the media, used the floor of the Congress to give the American people false stories. And I think that the punishment of being off the committee may be the lesser of two punishments. A lot of people believe he should be censured by Congress for what he's done. But just take a look at one thing that came out in the Twitter files last week. We learned that Adam Schiff not only did what he did on television and all the spin jobs he did, he actually used his power of his office, the color of his authority as a congressman, to go to Twitter and try to get Twitter to portray Devin Nunes in his very accurate report on Russia collusion misconduct by the FBI as Russian disinformation. It was so laughable that even the lefties at Twitter said, oh my God, we can't do this. This is kind of like Congressional, I think it called him a bot or a Congressional, one of the terms for someone who's a nuisance. Even they saw what Adam Schiff was doing. We didn't know that happened. For a member of Congress to use the power of their office to falsely ask a third party to create a false illusion in big tech should trouble all of us. Adam Schiff, in my mind, meets all the criteria of modern day McCarthyism.
Thank you, John. And John, what a pleasure to have you here with me. I'm real excited to have you back again, an award-winning investigative journalist, the host of John Solomon Reports, and founder of Just the News. I'm encouraging all of our listeners, check it out. You are great, John, a great friend of AMAC. Thank you so much. Great insight.
Thank you, Rebecca. Great to be with you. I love the AMAC audience.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can listen to more just like it. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, or by downloading the AMAC app. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Until next time, I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your podcast, Better for America. Thank you for being here. Have a wonderful evening.